Hi, welcome to our Sunday edition of the Alshech Academy here in the heart of Tzfat. We're delighted to have with us Yosef Stepansky to share with us again some beautiful ideas about Tzfat and on the giants of Tzfat. We're going to continue the learning of Rav Yosef Karro and particularly his relationships with the different characters in Tzfat. But in the meantime, I wanted just to bring to your attention that this Wednesday, the 28th of February, we're delighted to have our annual fundraising dinner, where we will be inviting all our teachers to come and give a quick resume of what they're teaching, what they've been teaching, and also their visions for the Alshech Academy moving forward. And we're hoping to invite some great Rabbanim to give us words of strength and encouragement. And we're going to be broadcasting this live on YouTube Live on Wednesday. So 6 p.m. Wednesday Israel time, 6:30 p.m. rather. Please tune in and be part of this momentous moment of manifesting our dreams for the Alshech Academy. Thank you so much.
Okay, Boker Tov. Okay, we're discussing Rabbi Yosef Karro, and just on him we can have a whole seminar in itself for a whole year, talking about this greatest of the rabbis who was here in Tzfat. And some of the audience sent me a few questions, and true, I tried to look into for the website of Holy Alshech Shul, who the website was online for a number of years, but now it's not. So I called her up, and hopefully she'll send me some of the articles she wrote in Hebrew, translated into English. And so best maybe contacting either Shlomo or me. I also have a website, so you can contact me through my website by just writing my name. Although the website is in Hebrew, but there's also some part of it is in English. And when I get the articles in English from her, I'll be happy to send them out. I wanted to show you, I showed you last time the new book that came out on Rabbi Yosef Karro, his biography, and on his halachic compilations, and also Rabbi Yosef Karro, the Mekubal, the mystic, okay, who wrote the Magid Mesharim, which is certainly a mystical diary. Okay, it was like, it's not only an autobiography of himself, it's unique, and it's sometimes it's ununderstandable. Okay, it's written partly in code, and in any case, it's certainly a mystical diary. This is the new book in Hebrew. In Hebrew, written by Yaron Ben Naeh, the historian, Chagai Peli.
Well, just increase the volume, if you could speak a bit louder.
Okay, and that's a new book. But on the other hand, we have a biography of Rabbi Yosef Karro written already 40, 50 years ago. It first came out in English by Professor Tzvi Verbolovsky, who taught for many years in Hebrew University, but the first edition came out in Oxford, in English, on Rabbi Yosef Karro. It's well known, and only later on it was translated into Hebrew. I have the Hebrew edition, but if you want to, you can look for it also in English. And the other book I have here, I didn't show you last time, but this is the biography written by Holy Alshech Shul, okay, Chayei Maran Yosef Karro, okay, it's only 600 pages long, and just goes to show that Rabbi Yosef Karro had, Baruch Hashem, a relatively long life with many, many events, and all his compilations just on what he wrote during his lifetime and printed in his lifetime, okay, many books and other things that he wrote. And so there are other books also. There's a book by Yaakov Even Chen, and many articles written on on the Halacha, on the Beit Yosef, on the Shulchan Aruch, on his other works. During his lifetime, he printed even the Kesef Mishneh on the Rambam. Okay, the commentary. Anybody who learns Rambam will also want to read the commentary on the Rambam by Rabbi Yosef Karro. Rabbi Yosef Karro, when he wrote the Beit Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch, it's based on three great rabbis: the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh. The Rambam, the Maimonides, the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak El-Fassi from North Africa, and the Rosh was Ashkenazi, but he went down to Spain, Rabbeinu Asher, in the Balaturim before. And so these are the compilations that he based his work on. He put them together and came out with the Beit Yosef and concised it into the famous Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Law. But before that, before we talk about his relationships with the other great rabbis of Tzfat, some of them were complicated relationships. We'll of course talk about a very interesting relationship he had with the Ari. But we have to remember the Ari was the age, he could have been his grandson, okay? Because Rabbi Yosef Karro was born in 1488. The Ari was born in 1534. Rabbi Yosef Karro lived in Tzfat for 40 years. The Ari was here only 2 years. The 2 years that the Ari was here, Rabbi Yosef Karro was already in his 80s. But they met, and maybe they even studied together, although legend says that Yosef Karro used to fall asleep when the Ari started teaching him. So we'll talk about their special relationship also. I don't know if we'll get to it today, though. Today I want to say a few things. I shouldn't forget some important things. We said a few words last time about what brought Rabbi Yosef Karro and Rabbi Shlomo Elkavetz, his friend and Chevruta to Tzfat, and that's the Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Okay, the first Tikkun Leil Shavuot that we have recorded, almost recorded live, like we're doing now, because Rabbi Shlomo Elkavetz describes exactly what happens at that very momentous event, probably in Saloniki. The epistle of Rabbi Shlomo Elkavetz that he wrote, it's considered one of the finest records in English. In Hebrew, of course. In Hebrew, of an event that took place in the Middle Ages. He describes exactly what happens. And I don't know if we have all of it translated into English. I don't know. In Hebrew, we have it printed in the Shla, in the Shnei Luchot HaBrit of Harav Yeshayahu Levi Horovitz, early 17th century. And Mor Altshuler brought down a few parts of it, and she discussed the Tikkun Leil Shavuot. She maintains it took place in Saloniki. Others think it could have taken place in Nikopol, which I mentioned last time, in Bulgaria, I think, on the Danube River. And in any case, it'll be Shlomo Elkavetz writes down exactly what happened there. And what I want to do is just quote just a few quotes from that. I do this usually before Shavuot. I think this last year I gave a shiur in English on this, and I quoted this last year on Shavuot. I quoted a lot from here. And anyway, the tikkun, which you can understand either as a repair or a decoration of the bride. Okay? So in the tikkun Leil Shavuot, which was done, according to Mor Altshuler, in 1533 in Saloniki, they started learning Mishnah and other things, like it says in the Zohar. And they talked about revelation and redemption. And then, exactly at midnight, when I was a child, I remember at midnight in Shavuot, we used to leave the shul and look up and wait for the sky to part. Okay? I think this is, this is like the revelation, this is like reconstructing the revelation of Mount Sinai. It's really a reconstruction of what happened at Matan Torah. So at midnight, we heard a voice speaking out of the mouth of the pious. They didn't see anybody. They heard a voice coming out of the throat of Rabbi Yosef Karro. Of course, a different voice than Rabbi Yosef Karro, not his own voice, some other voice, a bat kol, some other voice coming out of the mouth of the pious, a chassid. The pious here refers to Rabbi Yosef Karro. It was a loud voice with letters clearly enunciated. It was an exceedingly pleasant voice, becoming increasingly strong. We all fell upon our faces, and none of us had any spirit left in him. They were so shocked to hear a voice coming out of Rabbi Yosef Karro's throat, not his own, but someone else.
Who else was there besides Shlomo Alkabetz and him? Who else was there?
What?
Who else was there than that little Shlomo?
Okay, who else is there? Good question. There's supposed to be a minyan, but there wasn't, because some of the students there fell asleep. Only on the second night, Shavuot in Chutz La'aretz is two days. So there are 2 nights you can sit up and study and do the tikkun. So actually this first night, there were only 6 or 7, because a few that were supposed to come fell asleep and they weren't there. And Rabbi Yosef Karro reprimands them the next morning in the mikveh. Okay, I think I found the mikveh in Saloniki. And they reprimanded, but the second night they all came. And the voice came again. I jumped already to the second night, but I'm going back to the first night. It was the voice of the Torah, the celestial bride that Elkabetz called the Shekhinah. And so the Shekhinah doesn't appear, we hear her. Sometimes it's a her, sometimes it's a him, because sometimes he calls himself the Magid, but sometimes he calls himself the Mishnah, or the Neshama, or the Shekhinah, Hashchina, which is female. Anyway, the Shekhinah blesses them. Happy are you in the world, and happy in the next, for you resolved to adorn me on this night. The Shekhinah's voice trembled as she described how she was cast on the ground with no one to comfort her. And then the Shekhinah started offering words of comfort and encouragement. And then, maybe the punchline of this whole revelation, then unexpectedly, her voice changed. She turned to the group and ordered, "Go up to the land of Israel, for not all times are opportune. Let not your eyes have pity on your worldly goods. For you eat the goodness of the higher land." In other words, go up to the land of Israel. Ta'asu aliyah. You have to leave. And now's the time to leave. And now's the best time to go up. Go up to the land of Israel, for I sustain you here, and I will sustain you there. To you will be peace, for your household peace, and to all that is yours, peace. In Hebrew it sounds better. Vatem shalom uvatechem shalom, v'chol asher lachem shalom, Hashem oz la'amo yiten, Hashem yivarech et amo v'shalom. Okay.
Who's documenting all of
This?
Who's documenting?
This is the Shekhinah is talking to the 6-7 people at the Tikkun.
And who wrote?
Shlomo Alkabetz.
And Elkabetz wrote this down afterward, and this is the epistle of Elkabetz, and he sent this epistle, this igeret, to other people in an important city, Ir v'em b'Yisrael. You see, it's all written in code. It doesn't say where it happened. Okay, and Elkabetz wrote this down to make sure that everyone in the circle here, at least, who was witness to this, they should know and remember the tzivui, the commandment to go up to Eretz Yisrael.
What is this Igeret called?
So,
What is this Igeret called?
okay, it's called Igeret Shlomo Elkabetz.
Oh, okay. If I
Okay,
look online, you'll find
Igeret, the epistle of
Yeah.
Shlomo Elkabetz, and we'll talk more about this one day, maybe before Shavuot. And they heard this, and like I said before, there wasn't a minyan there. And only the night afterward, the ones who fell asleep, again, understood what's going on, and they all gathered together in the second night. And again, the second night, the Shekhinah came, and the voice came, and the Shekhinah commanded them again, go up to Eretz Yisrael. The problem was that then, at least, even today, it's not so easy to get up and go to the plane in the airport and get to Eretz Yisrael. Then, it was so much harder. And it took them a few years.
You went for Snikapol.
It took them a few years. Okay? According to Holy Alshech Shul, it happened in 1533, and only in 1536, 3 years later, do we know of Rabbi Yosef Karro and Elkabetz going up to the land of Israel. Some say they came together, some say they came one after the other, some say Elkabetz came first. We also have a letter, we have a quote of a sermon given by Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, a farewell sermon that he gave, probably in Saloniki, before he left. We also have that in his words, in his quote. We have that also that he wrote. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz also wrote many things. He was a great Talmid Chacham. He wasn't only a poet. He was more well known as a commentator, somebody who wrote books on Megillat Esther and other Manot Levi. Sure, he wrote things even before he came to Eretz Yisrael. And the famous poem Lecha Dudi, he wrote also, but he didn't write so many other poems. He was well known as a commentator.
How old was he when he came to
The Shlomo Elkabetz was about 15 years younger than Rabbi Yosef Karro. He's about the same age as the Alshech. Okay, Elkabetz wasn't born in Spain. He was born in the Ottoman Empire, probably in Saloniki. The Alshech was probably born in Adrianople, in Adirna. They were about the same age. They knew each other. They probably met in Saloniki. Okay, and people went from place to place there. And for all I know, I think the Alshech came in 1535, a year before. The Alshech came to Tzfat. Alshech also was younger than Rabbi Yosef Karro, and the Alshech outlived all the others. The Alshech lived to a ripe old age, some say even to his 90s.
But I understood the Alshech was a student of Rabbi Yosef Karro even in the Ottoman Empire. Is that right?
That they met there.
Yeah.
I think so. Yosef Karro and Alshech.
Yes.
I'm sure. Because Rabbi Yosef Karro spent a number of years in Adrianople. Mm-hmm. He started writing the Beit Yosef there. Mm-hmm. He married the daughter of one of the important rabbis of Adrianople, Rabbi Yitzhak Sabah. Although we don't know the daughter's name, we don't know the wife's name. And so they knew each other before coming. I don't know how much they knew each other. I'd like to know more. But we do know for sure that Rabbi Yosef Karro and the Elkabetz together, they sat together and they studied together, at least in Saloniki.
Just to get the chronology correct, Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz came to Eretz Israel in 1533?
1535, that's what I read. You know, I don't think we know really so much. The historians think so. And that's what I read in 1535. And a little before, the Alshech was here already when Rabbi Yosef Karro came, and he was already a Dayan. Even though he was in his 20s, he was in late 20s already, the Alshech was already one of the Dayanim here. That's what I learned. And look, when you're in your younger years, in 20s and 30s, you have a lot of energy. He started giving these sermons, his sermons, I'm sure, here. Maybe here already in his early age. Although we also have other stories about the rabbi of the shul of the community where the Alshech was in the end. Okay? Rabbi Avraham Shalom, he's not so well known. Rabbi Avraham Shalom was also a very important rabbi here in Tzfat. But he passed away, and he had a young son, Rabbi Chia Shalom, and the community where Rabbi Avraham Shalom was a rabbi, okay, they wanted his son to continue him. But the son wasn't even 13 years old. And here we have the Alshech, who was already in the late 20s, and they said, Alshech, we want you to be our rabbi. But Elkabet said, wait a minute, I don't know, we have the young boy here. So Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, when he was here already, he had things to say. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz was a strong personality, so was Rabbi Yosef Karro. They were both strong people who influenced greatly the others here in Tzfat. Shlomo Elkabetz went into more mystical things, but he also was a big posek. He also wrote, I think he also has Shelot Utshuvot, he has Responsa. And so they all lived together here. Sometimes they argued, okay? And we're talking about the 1530s, okay, when most of them came, the Alshech came, Rabbi Yosef Karro and Elkabetz came 1536, and then we had the explosion in 1538 of the big argument over the smicha, over reconstructing the Sanhedrin here in Tzfat, to be able to do smicha here. That was in so in the 1530s, we have a lot of halachic and also messianic ferment here, a lot of energy extracted here from Tzfat in the 1530s already then. And let me remind you, the Ari only came in 1570. A lot of things happened here in Tzfat beforehand, and Rabbi Yosef Karro was part of it. But even before they came in the 1520s, we already have Rabbi Yaakov Berav and other rabbis who were here. So Tzfat was foremost becoming the most important Jewish center in the world.
That's an entire century, Kimat.
Ken, we're talking about 1520, 1530s, and it goes on. Yosef Karro passes away only in 1575. Elkabetz, a number of years after. Rabbi Moshe Alshech passed away around 1600. So he lived out further past the others. So this tikkun is so important. Some people think wrongly it happened here in Tzfat. But although it happened in Chutz La'aretz, and that's what sent people here, these two coming to Eretz Yisrael and coming to Tzfat, okay, and it wasn't the only thing. That there were also beliefs that the Messiah, the Mashiach, is coming in certain years. 1540, for instance, Rabbi Shlomo Molcho, who probably never came to Tzfat, although legend says he did. And there are stories about Rabbi Shlomo Molcho coming to Tzfat and looking at the blue and describing the blue paint on the walls and describing the blue eyes of the daughter of Rabbi Yaakov Berav. This is all legendary, okay? But I talked to the historian who wrote a doctorate on Shlomo Molcho, and he thinks he never came to Tzfat. But he influenced greatly Rabbi Yosef Karro already there in Saloniki. Rabbi Shlomo Molcho himself was a big Kabbalist, and he even went to the Pope and tried to convince him it's time for our Mashiach to come. He became friendly with the Christians. He himself was a converso, okay, an anus. Okay, and once we used to say maranos. We don't use that word anymore. And he came back. He came back to Judaism, and he believed a certain years that the Mashiach will come, maybe to be prepared in 1540. I think we talked about this the last time. 1540 is 300 years after the millennium. It's Shnat Shin. Shnat Shin, 1540. Shlomo Molcho believed that that's the ripe year, the best year, that the Mashiach will finally come and appear. And in the end, though, Rabbi Shlomo Molcho, who influenced greatly Jews in the Balkans, in the Ottoman Empire, in Saloniki, okay, in the area of Greece today, in the end, he found his end. He found his. He was put to the stake, not by the Pope, but by Karl V, the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, in Germany, Regensburg. Okay, there they locked him up, and in the end, he was burned to the stake in Italy. So what happened to Rabbi Shlomo Molcho also greatly influenced Rabbi Yosef Karro.
Where was he based? Where was he based?
Okay, he was based in the Balkans, in Greece, Istanbul, Saloniki, and he talked. I'm talking about the late 20s, early 30s. I think he was killed in 1532. I think 1532, and these are the years of Yosef Karro before he comes to Eretz Israel. And in the Magid Mesharim, written by Rabbi Yosef Karro, the Magid, the Shechina, the Magid talks about Rabbi Shlomo Molcho, Shlomo Bechili, and he tells Rabbi Yosef Karro that I'm going to help you do a number of things that you dream of. And one of the dreams you have, I'm going to help you do it, because you're dreaming of being put to the stake like Rabbi Yosef, like Rabbi Shlomo Molcho, Kiddush Hashem. Rabbi Yosef Karro writes in his own diary, okay, that one of his dreams was Kiddush Hashem, to be put to death by Kiddush Hashem, like Rabbi Shlomo Molcho. So he also influenced Rabbi Yosef Karro and others. So we have things going on there also in Saloniki, that area, and in the end, these people come to Tzfat. They also had an important rabbi. I didn't mention him yet. Important rabbi already in Saloniki, where Rabbi Yosef Karro learned at the yeshiva, although he had his own Beit Midrash. Rabbi Shlomo Elkevitz, they also learned together in the yeshiva of Rabbi Tatachik, a well-known rabbi, the rabbi of Saloniki. Saloniki also had tens of synagogues and Batei Midrash. It was the biggest Jewish community in the world then. And Rabbi Yosef Karro also is there a number of years. Then it was maybe 25,000 Jews. Istanbul and Saloniki were the biggest concentrations of Jews then, after the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. Only later on, maybe a century later, does Poland start getting more Jews, and then a little later Lithuania, Eastern Europe. But before that, already in the 16th century, right? Let's say the first 100 years after Spain, it's Turkey and Greece.
Inquisition was?
The expulsion of the Jews from Spain, 1492. 1497 from Portugal. And then many Jews who survived, many Jews left Judaism. They stayed in Spain, okay? Many of them became conversos. But many decided to leave. Many went to North Africa. But many went also to the Ottoman Empire that welcomed them. That's well known. Okay, so that's a few things I wanted to get straight about Rabbi Yosef Karro's earlier years because he was only 47 years old when he came to, I'm saying already 47 years old when he came to Tzfat, and already a very well-known rabbi. And he came with Elkabetz, and that's the beginning of the golden age of Tzfat. But again, not that there weren't rabbis before. There were rabbis before. Okay. I wanted to say a few words also. When Rabbi Yosef Karro was here, he lived right next door. His house is right next door to us, underneath the Yosef Karro synagogue. That's what legend says. Legend says, not only legend, not only tradition, the tradition of Tzfat, of the Jews of Tzfat. Jews haven't left Tzfat since then. There's no reason not to believe this tradition. I wanted to show just a few pictures. We're sitting here. There are no windows on the eastern wall, so we can't see. But when we go out, so we can see next door, we have the tallest building in the Jewish quarter. Then and now. Okay? Talk about this high building. This is the Rabbi Yosef Karro Shul today. Okay? We're down below here. We're down below here. Mm-hmm. Okay? It looks pretty high for us also, but it's lower below, down the slope, below the Yosef Karro synagogue. Mm-hmm. And next to us, on this level where we are here, behind the wall here, is the courtyard, maybe a little to the right, the courtyard of the house of Rabbi Yosef Karro, which was seemingly below the shul and the yeshiva.
That's right. His house was below the yeshiva.
The house is below. Today is the shul. But then also, it seems, if you ask me, it was also a very prominent building. Because here, it's like in Tveria. Mm-hmm. The houses that had a number of stories, even though they fell down in the earthquakes, but even afterward, they were rebuilt with high stories. I think the yeshiva, the Yeshivat Beit Yosef, the yeshiva of Yosef Karro, was also very prominent and high, built with a number of stories, just like it is today. Even though it fell down in the two earthquakes of 1759 and 1837. So right next to us is the Yosef Karro complex and the Yosef Karro house. Okay, here's the entrance to the house, the blue door. Today it's a kollel.
That's
okay?
right.
Today it's a kollel.
Yeah.
Okay? But tradition says, here's another picture of it. We gave a lecture on this complex, on the architecture of this complex, in a conference on Yosef Karro in September, this last September in Yerushalayim. So we're studying the relationship between each of the buildings, one next to the other. And tradition says he lived here. He lived here 40 years. For 40 years, this was his center.
So that's why they say there's a path directly from there to the shul, to the Alshech Shul, I heard.
That he came to. I'm sure he came here to pray. Partly, I'm sure. Maybe it was like a little shtibel. Maybe they had, maybe they davened here a little later. Sometimes Yosef Karro, I'm sure, got up early every day.
Yeah.
But maybe there was a certain day that he came. Sure, he came here to the Alshech.
Yeah.
Okay, and he respected the Alshech. Everybody came to hear the sermons of the Alshech, including Yosef Karro himself. But I wanted to say that we hardly have any descriptions of the yeshiva itself. Okay, if Rabbi Yosef Karro wrote here the Shulchan Aruch, he finished here the Beit Yosef. He wrote here the Kesef Mishneh. He wrote here the responsa of Kat Rochel. He even wrote here the diary, the Magid Meshalim diary, the mystical diary of his conversation with the Magid. I wanted to stress the Maggid continued to talk to him here in his house. Okay? We know about that. First of all, in Shifchei Ha'ari, that talks about the Ari, we have a description about that. And so the Maggid, who first talked to them, I don't want to say appear because I don't want people to think that somebody saw him, but his voice came out of the throat of Rabbi Yosef Karro. It began in Chutz La'aretz. It began there, but continued here.
Who recorded, when the Maggid Meshulam spoke from his mouth, who recorded what he said?
Not in the Tikkun. You're talking not in the Tikkun. In the Tikkun, El Kabetz recorded it.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good question. We have it described in the Shifchei Ha'ari. We don't know exactly who wrote the Shifchei Ha'ari, but part of it at least is based on Rabbi Shlomo Shlumil's compilations of the early 17th century. He was here in Tzfat about 25, 30 years after the Uri, and he even he's the one that interviewed the last wife of Rabbi Yosef Karro, the young lady Ashkenaziyah. By the way, there's a theory that her name could have been Tamar. I don't know, I read that by Yaron Benaeh, I think, writes that maybe her name was Tamar. I don't know his source. And she lived still in 1607. Wow. And she described her husband, Rabbi Yosef Karro, who passed away 32 years before. Okay?
This was recorded by Shlomo
Shlomo Shlumil is an Ashkenazi who came to Tzfat and describes Tzfat in 1607. Okay? Tzfat already went down and most of the great rabbis, including the Alshech, already passed away. But there were still yeshivot here and synagogues, and he described Tzfat during those years. And already during that time, legends were compiled about the Ari. And he's one of the people who started telling people, other people, when he went back home, telling people about the Ari.
You could read some of the extracts of what he wrote.
That from what who wrote? What Ari wrote?
No, Shlomo.
Okay, we have really letters that he wrote, the letters of Rabbi Shlomo Shlumil Ha'igurot, and most people say that these letters are the basis for the book called Shifchei Ha'ari. There's also a book called Toldot Ha'ari that Professor Benayahu thought that's the source for Shifchei Ha'ari, but most scholars today, I think, believe that Shifchei Ha'ari is the source for Toldot Ha'ari. It's a complicated thing, all what's written after it, but now we're going into the Ari.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to get into the Ari, and we'll still talk about the Ari and Rabbi Yosef Karro, the 2 years they were here together in Tzfat.
I'm curious about these letters because we all speculate what life was like here, but when you read letters like that, I think it'll give us a really good insight as to what life was like. And I'd like to...
That's right. These letters are super important. You're right.
But they came after he was already niftar.
What
The letters were written after he was already niftar. They didn't meet Rabbi Shlomo.
Rabbi Shlomo Shlumil. That's right. They're written 30 years after.
Yeah. So this is all based on legend, on hearsay, on hearing. When you hear about tzaddikim, there tends to be embellishment.
Okay, that's right. But the fact is, he was here for only 2 years. And he was such a great personality and influenced so much people by talking to them. So it took years for people to start to understand. Rabbi Chaim Vital wrote 40 years. He wrote for 40 years what he heard from the Ari in 1 year. Okay? And not only he wrote and crossed out and wrote and crossed out. He wasn't sure if he understood everything in that certain year. Chaim Vital was the one who heard from the Ari the most. And so But we're going. That's into the Ari. How much do we have? Some more time, or?
We have some more time, but you can stop it whatever you want.
Okay. So I wanted to just to say. I was starting to say that we don't have are live online descriptions of the yeshiva. Okay, we had the whole Shulchan Aruch written here by Yosef Karro. I'm sure he's sitting either in the yeshiva or in his house. Or, I like to say, if he didn't want, his talmidim, his students, to nudge him all the time, he went to Biria. Okay, and there he had a nice place in Biria. And he wrote some of the, he signed his name.
What's the link with Biria?
In Biria, we have a village outside of Tzfat, just like today. And there, Rabbi Yosef Karro finished the Orach Chaim. He writes, I'm finishing it here in Biria. So he lived in Biria. Some say yes, there's a Yeshivat Beit Yosef in Biria, Rav Eliyahu Biton. Okay, a well-known rabbi who lives in Biria. He made a whole yeshiva there today, the yeshiva of the Beit Yosef. So if you ask me, Rabbi Yosef Karro, when he wanted to sit by himself and write, he wanted some peace and quiet. Here he had 200 talmidim. And so he went to Biria. And he had maybe a little tzimir, a little apartment there. And there he wrote part of his compilations. But we have one description of the yeshiva written by a Yemenite coming from Yemen, from Timman, in 1567. He traveled all over the world then. Even went to India. He came through Babylonia, through Mesopotamia. He went through Urfa, and maybe Ur Kasdim in southern Turkey today. I was there. And finally came to Eretz Israel. He was a Yemenite who was super curious into looking and seeing the world. But he's also a very big Talmid Chacham, Yoreh Shamayim. And he wrote, it was a big book, I have it home. He wrote the book Sefer HaMusar. It's a book written with riddles, a makama, rhymes, riddles and rhymes, book Sefer HaMusar, and he describes the places he visited.
What's his name?
His name, Rabbi Zachariah Yechye El-Dahari. El-Dahari, it's a tzaddik, but you're supposed to say the. Okay, it's hard for me to say it. My wife is Yemenite, she teaches me. El-Dahari. Okay, and his descendants live in Rosh Ayin until today. Mordechai Yitzhari. He gave me a copy of the book of Sefer HaMusar that his great-great-great-great-grandfather wrote. He came to Tzfat in 1567. His descriptions of Tzfat then are among the most important we have. The 1560s, part of the golden age of Tzfat. For all I know,
I would love you to quote some of those.
Here, I'm going to quote just a few, two, three sentences. For all I know, he is the only one that vividly describes the yeshiva of the Beit Yosef. He describes seeing Rabbi Yosef Karro standing and teaching before his students on Shabbat. He gave a Shabbat Rasha. So I want to just a short quote from here. I gave a lecture just on this, on the description of Tzfat. We learn about Tzfat from here. He writes like this he mentions Rabbi Yosef Karro, 1567, ובפרט המאור הגדול החכם רבי יוסף קארו, אשר מישיבתו חכמי צפת לא יסורו. He already writes, the great Rabbi Yosef Karro, the Rosh Yeshiva. The people at Tzfat go to him and they don't leave him. כי בליבו התלמוד אגור. In his heart, all of Shas. He knows all of Shas. Okay? That's not so easy, knowing all of Shas. Okay, we think, Rabbi Yosef, of course he knew all of Shas. Rav Ovadia Yosef knew all of Shas. Okay, but even today, it's a very hard thing to know, even with the computer. Even a computer is hard. It's hard for him to know all of Shas. ואלך שבת אחת אל ישיבתו לראות את יקרת תפארת גדולתו. He goes to the yeshiva. He's there, and he looks and sees Rabbi Yosef Karro. He sees his greatness. והחכם הזקן יושב על הכיסא. He's sitting on his chair. Hazaken. Okay? He's already almost 80 years old. He's 79 years old in 1567. החכם הזקן יושב על כיסא, בפיהו דורש על הנושא. He's giving a drasha. He's sitting, okay? And he's giving a drasha. This is Shabbat. He's not writing this on Shabbat, of course. I'll tell you a secret now. He wrote this only a few years later when he was in jail in Tzana. When he went back to Teman, they put him in jail. And when he was in jail, he wrote this whole book. And then he writes the whole drasha. He remembered the whole drasha. It was Shabbat. He didn't write down notes. Okay? Some say it wasn't really the exact drasha. Some say it was his own drasha that he put into the words, into the mouth of Rabbi Yosef Karro. V'nasa v'natan al derech hapshat v'kabalah. That's very important. He's writing that he heard the drasha of Yosef Karro that was pshat, but also Kabalah. Also Kabalah. I don't know how much we heard Kabalah from Rav Ovadia Yosef. Rabbi Yosef Karro was his mentor. Kabalah, he had a lot of things to say, Rav Ovadia Yosef, but he was into Halacha mostly. Rabbi Yosef Karro, pshat and Kabalah. Hechacham yakar v'na'ala. Lefanav ke-200 talmidim. This is the only source we know how many students he had in his yeshiva. He had 200 students sitting before him. Talmidim yikarim mu'ulim yoshvim al gabei hasafsalim. They're sitting on benches, listening to Rabbi Yosef Karro. So here we have a vivid description. Afterward he meets a student that he's familiar with. He knows him from Teman. That's one of the reasons I think there was at least a small Jewish Yemenite community in Tzfat already then. Some say that Rabbi Zcharia el-Dahari brought back a copy with him of the Shulchan Aruch to Teman. It was printed already, yes. 1567, yes. I think so, or maybe yes. But he could have taken back a hard copy, not a printed one, a written, Ktav Yad. Maybe he brought back a Ktav Yad. Some say he was the first to bring back, and the Shulchan Aruch brought to Teman, that made a whole balagan in Teman afterward. People go according to the Rambam. It's a big, even today, between the Yemenites. It's not so easy. Shulchan Aruch or Rambam. In the end, we have Baladi Vishami, but that's about the Yemenites. And so he was here. He went down to Tveria. He describes Tveria. That's a whole another story. And then he goes home. He goes back to Teman. And he's put in jail. And in jail, he writes Sefer HaMusar.
What charges? Why was he jailed?
Why was in jail? Because it wasn't easy living in Teman then either. It's not easy living there today, at least in northern Teman. Okay? In Tzana. Tzana is northern Teman. Okay? Tzana is under, is governed now by the Shiites. Okay? By the Chutim. We hear about them now. So he was put in jail. There were problems in Teman even then with the imam. And so here we have the description, the only live description we have of somebody sitting there and describing a sermon of Rabbi Yosef Karro. If anybody finds another description in Hebrew, or even in English, I don't know, of the yeshiva, I would like to know. We have 200 students. I want to finish up by saying, we call Rabbi Yosef Karro Maran. Today, if you mention Maran to a youngster, he'll say Harav Yosef. But where does this come from? It comes from Rabbi Yosef Karro, who was the mentor of Rav Yosef. Maran. First of all, Maran is already from the Gemara. Maran Adonenu. Adon. Adonenu Morenu. Maran is Aramaic for Adonenu. But in the time of Rabbi Yosef Karro, already they started giving commentaries on the word Maran. Maran, Matayim Rabbanim Nismach. Matayim Rabbanim Nismach means that whatever Rabbi Yosef Karro said, he had 200 people saying, "You're right," agreeing with him. He was the one who gave smicha to others, to the Alshech. But he had 200 rabbis who said, "We're giving you smicha. You're our Rosh Yeshiva also." Maran, Matayim Rabbanim Nismach. And so, afterward, even today, when we want to give a respected adjective to a great rabbi, we say Maran. Of course, Harav Ovadia Yosef, Maran, who was his mentor. And that's why, Chayei Maran, Yosef Karro. You don't have to say Harav. Maran is the Rav HaChashuv, Yosef Karro. Sometimes we have another word added on, HaKadosh. That's the Alshech. They say the Alshech HaKadosh. Haori HaKadosh. They didn't add the word HaKadosh. Yosef Karro was a professor. He was like the head of all the rabbis. And for me, we can say also HaKadosh. But the Maran, we know that's the original Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karro, who was our neighbor here. Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I would welcome you to quote some of these diaries that you mentioned. Ezrat Hashem next week.